Good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Morin. I am Associate Director of Tango, and I'm so glad that you could all join us this morning for this webinar with Dave Hassenbalg, who is the President of Customized Solutions. I'm going to turn it over to Dave in just 1 second. I just wanted to remind you all, for those of you who are members in Connecticut, we have an HR forum tomorrow morning jointly between Tango and CCPA. That will be at the CCPA office in Rocky Hill starting at 9 a.m. And you can find more information about that on our website, www.tangoalliance.org. Also on Thursday, February 26th, we have another webinar, same time, 10 a.m., and that will be a live demo of the new Tango Benefits Exchange. So if you're interested in joining either of those programs, again, you can find that information at our website, tangoalliance.org. Or you are welcome to email me, Sarah Morin, that's smorin@tangoalliance.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. I'm very excited for this program this morning. Dave and I have had several conversations about the content of this webinar, and I think he has a lot of great information to share with you. So Dave, take it away.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the opportunity to present this topic. It certainly is a topic that seems to be of interest to everyone in nonprofits, but particularly to those who are in roles of executive director and or board members, because that's a very, very crucial relationship. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. We're going to use some case studies that some people had submitted ahead of time when we sent out the initial invitation. So that's something I really appreciate. Appreciate that we had the opportunity to get some of that from people who had sent in the information. So thank you again for those of you who sent it in ahead of time. If you didn't get a chance to, we'll still have an opportunity. We'll talk about that in just a second. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and do a little bit of an orientation to what it is that you're seeing, how we're going to do this webinar today, and answer some frequently asked questions. So one of the first questions that I get is, will a recording be available? Can I watch this recording, or will I be able to see it and ask someone else in my organization, for example, to see the recording? And the short answer is yes, you will. We are going to be recording this webinar, and it's going to be available on my YouTube channel for Customized Solutions, but you will automatically get an email because you have registered for this. You'll get an email with a link to the recording. Feel free to share that or share the link on the YouTube channel with those that you would like to. That is up to you. Then other questions that I always get is, can I get a copy of the slides being used in the webinar? And the short answer to that is yes. We'll be able to get that for you, and you'll do that at the end of this presentation, and we'll try to get that email to you as well if you have any questions. And then the last question that we always get is, can I ask questions? And you can. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a number, it's called a sidebar, and you'll see a number of tabs on that. And we're going to talk through how you can ask questions. So on that sidebar, you're going to see tabs that say chat, polls, attendees, and pop-ins. Specifically, the chat feature, that chat tab, when you click on that, you're going to be able to type into, below that red bar, any question that you have. And so if you need to send a note just to me, and you can do that. Just deselect to everybody. If it's just a general question, you can select to everybody, and everyone else will get a chance to see it. For example, I just got a chat, so I'm glad to see people are using it. So there might be a little bit of an echo in the sound. So is there a little bit of an echo in the sound that people are hearing? Hopefully that'll clear out a little bit, but it won't be too distracting. But we'll do what we can. Okay, so it might be with an individual connection. So hopefully, with the Google platform that we're using here, it won't be too bad. All right, so if you have any questions, use the chat feature, and then throughout the presentation, if you have a particular, we call case study, or an example of a real world situation that you're dealing with that you would like us to address, we'll collect those at the end, and we'll start to address that. But as I said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about who you're talking to. All right. So my name is Dave Hassenbach, as Sarah had mentioned. I'm the president of Customized Solutions, which is a firm where we focus on building leadership and leadership capabilities in organizations. And one of the areas that we like to focus is on nonprofits, even independent schools. So I'm also the founder of the Center for Leadership Excellence in Independent Schools. And the goal there is really to help these organizations to produce more meaningful results that are more meaningful to them and their constituents through leadership. I'm a firm believer that leadership is anything but a soft skill. It's actually very much a hard skill. It's one of those things that will either enable or be a detractor for what happens in most organizations. And so we talk about a very real world examples of what to do with leadership. And this is one of the things I'm really excited about this webinar, because we get a chance to talk about some real world scenarios and real world situations. And so this is really a great opportunity and a great forum, a great venue. So let's go ahead and tell you a little bit about how we're going to handle this. First of all, before we get into that, I want to thank Tango. So Sarah and the folks here at Tango are always great to partner with. For those of you who are members of Tango, you understand what they do and how they service the nonprofit community. For those of you who may not be members of Tango, it's a phenomenal organization about helping nonprofits to be more effective in serving nonprofit organizations. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be a partner with Tango and to work with other Tango organizations. So I want to thank Sarah for doing that and allowing us the opportunity to do that. So why are we talking about this? Executive directors and boards relationships. Why is that an issue, right? For those of you who are in those positions, you understand that the relationship between executive directors and boards is such a critical one. It's crucial to the overall organization, because it's in that relationship and from that relationship that everything else that happens in the organization cascades. It sets the tone for the work that's done throughout the organization. It is the foundation for the culture of the entire nonprofit. So, it's a walking, talking billboard, if you will, for the way people work with each other and the way people treat each other and the way people can ask questions and be a team and engage in effective conversations. As goes the relationship between the executive director and the board, so goes the culture and the rest of the organization, which is why this is such a crucial exchange. That the nature of that relationship is so essential. And despite the best of intentions, we realize that sometimes the relationship starts to go south. And so you see our little compass there. It starts to go a little bit south. And we want to give you some tools that will help you to make sure that you're managing that relationship as effectively as you can. So here's how we're going to approach this today. As I mentioned, we had solicited input from everyone who received an invitation to this webinar. And in this invitation, we asked you to send in real world problems, real world breakdowns, real world challenges to building and maintaining and establishing that executive director board relationship. And so what we did, we received a number of responses, and I want to thank everybody who sent those in. So we started with those real world examples. And so how we're going to approach it is that we're going to we have culled together the themes and some of the common examples, and we may get into some specifics, but of what happened in a case-by-case basis. We don't want to do that too often, because it might identify some sensitive issues, but we culled together themes. And so we're going to talk about those themes. What were some of the challenges? What are some of the root causes that we look at that from a leadership perspective? and then give you some things that you can take away to as next steps or how you can solve those. So we're going to give you some solutions. And as I said, as we're going through this, if some of this conversation, this discussion triggers ideas or thoughts, then feel free to use the chat feature. Make sure you click on that chat tab and go ahead and enter in, hey, I've got this situation, and we'll do our best to try to address those specifically at the end. But one of the things that I found through my experience working with these organizations and working in the domain of leadership, there are some pretty common themes that have been submitted. So I think you're going to find these to be very helpful and certainly very educational. Okay, so let's kick it off. So the first one that we get is, okay, there was a previous executive director, and they had, let's call it a contentious relationship with the board of directors or with the board. Or there may have been a management team that was created by that previous executive director, and they are, for whatever reason, no longer there. You're the new executive director. You walk into the situation, and guess what? Now you've inherited that. Now what do you do? So here's where I'm going to do our first interactive part. So in just a minute, I'm going to put up a poll, and this is a poll just to get a gauge of what kind of roles we're dealing with of people who are on this webinar. So whether you're an executive director, a board member, management team, HR, something else, but I want to get a gauge for who we have in attendance so that we can address some of the specific challenges. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a poll pop up, and just simply asking you, what is your role in your nonprofit organization? So just click on that, click the submit, and we'll go ahead and be able to go ahead and take a look at that. And so give yourself a second, go ahead and vote. And while you're voting, I want to start, then we'll go back to our case study here and start talking a little bit of this particular challenge. So you've walked into the mess. You've walked into the situation where you've got one of the challenges ahead of you. What do? It's a bit of a challenge. It's a real challenge because unfortunately, as people, we don't have etch-a-sketch memories. You don't walk in the door and you shake your head and ask the board of directors to shake their head and say, okay, everything that happened in the past, let's just wipe that clean and we're going to start fresh. People don't have the etch-a-sketch memory as much as we would wish or like them to have that. So one of the things that it's important to realize when you're dealing with people is that you're dealing with people, and people are human, and people have history, and people have stories, and the stories that people create based on the history lead us to believe certain things. And so unfortunately, you might be walking into a situation where there are very, very strong preconceptions about what the executive director is or isn't supposed to do, or should or shouldn't do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we understand is just that. What is the nature of our working relationship? What are we about? Okay, so as humans, you can think of this, and we talk about humans, and I'll talk about a lot of the human interaction a little bit more in a second. Because leadership is about influencing other people to do something, to produce something, to take action, you've got to deal with the reality of the mess of kind of human nature. And it's not always clean, it's not always pretty, but it is reality. So as humans, we tend to protect and create our own perspective of reality. You often say that that it's not what you say, is what people hear you say that means something. And we'll again talk a little bit more about that in a second. But it's true. I was talking to I have a 14-year-old daughter, and the other day we were talking, and she was asking me about a situation she was dealing with a friend of hers. And I said, you realize there are 3 perspectives in that situation? And she said, I thought there were 2. And I said, no, there's three. There's your perspective, there's the other person's perspective, and then there's what really happened. So all of us tend to filter the things that happen to us to validate the thoughts and feelings that we already have. And so I use this metaphor of the bell jar. So you see a little picture of the bell jar. It's almost like we create this little bell jar reality around us. And all the facts and data and the reality of our world around us, we filter through this jar, and we take in the things that validate what we are looking at, and we try to exclude those things that challenge our reality, our sense of reality in our bell jar. All right. So I'm going to use this acronym, is BELF jar. So as humans, we have bodies. We are emotional creatures. We have language. We use language. Language creates reality for us. We have practices, the things that we engage in on a regular basis, and we all have history. And so those are the things that we try to use to filter our experiences as we engage in interactions with other people. So now I'm going to end the poll, and we're going to take a quick look at the results to see who we've got on the line, because who we've got and the role that you have influences what you see as possible. So based on this poll, looks like we've got about 68% executive directors. We don't have any HR people in the room, which is actually a little bit of a surprise because we almost always have one sneaking in. Other senior leadership roles within an organization, mid-level leadership roles, and we've got some others, and it might be some board members out there who might be in that other category. So most of us here are in the executive director role, right? So because we're in that role and we're talking about the relationship between board members and executive directors, we filter information based on that, based on what we're looking for. So you came to this webinar looking for a certain kind of information, looking for something that's going to help you. And that is the filter through which you are listening for what I'm telling you and what we're talking about here. Same thing happens in every other situation. So when you're engaging with your board members, when you're engaging with people throughout your organization, we all tend to filter the data and the facts through our own little jars. And it's important to recognize that everybody's got those. And so as the leader who is trying to influence other people to coordinate action, produce results, deliver on promises, you've got to work through the jar, right? The metaphor that I sometimes also use is like the Price is Right game, the Plinko. Everybody ever see that in Plinko on Price is Right, where the guy stands at the top of the ladder, and he's got a chip, like a giant checkers piece, and he's got little pegs throughout the board, and he's trying to drop the checker piece into the $10,000 bonus. And as he drops it, it bounces across, and it bounces and hops, and usually ends up almost on the opposite side from where he started. It's not unlike that when you're dealing with people. A lot of times we hear things and we bounce it through our own little filter, and what lands may be very, very different than what we intended. So it's important to understand that, particularly when you're dealing with some challenging relationships or relationships that may not be going the direction that we want. So when you're dealing with a board who has had a relationship with the previous executive director, one of the things that we can deal with, and ways to deal with this, is to make sure that we understand the difference between assessments and facts. And so these are some of the basic communication essentials. And so let me explain those a little bit. An assessment is just a judgment or an opinion. It is just something that I think. It is never true or false, never right or wrong, never good or bad, never absolute. It is just an opinion. A fact, however, is true or false, can be measured. Evidence can be provided that allows another person to look at it and come up with the same conclusion. A perfect example is that of those of us who are here in the Northeast on Sunday, right? It's been super cold here for weeks and weeks and weeks. And Sunday, it warmed up to a balmy, I think, 38 degrees where we are. And I'm walking outside and I take my jacket off and I'm cleaning off the driveway of the ice and stuff. And I'm thinking, man, it's warm. Well, warm is just an assessment. It is just an opinion that I have. And it's always relative because it's warm relative to something else that I was feeling. Now, you could look at it and say, well, it's not warm. What's warm to you is not warm to me, but it is 38 degrees, and we have a thermometer. We can look at that, and we trust that it's valid. That is a fact. So an assessment versus a fact. And one of the flags you can take away from this is don't should on yourself. A should, whenever you hear words like should, must, always, never, have to, good, bad, right, wrong, all of those are flag words that you are working with an assessment or just an opinion. So whenever you've got a relationship with your board of directors and they are telling you or you are telling them, you shouldn't be doing this. That's the wrong thing to do. This is the right thing to do. All of those are just an assessment, just an opinion. Now, it's important you do have to use assessments and opinions to be effective, right? Do we think we're going to hit our fundraising goals this year? Yes, that's an assessment. Okay, it's so you can use assessments and use them as valid pieces of input for leadership conversations, absolutely. But recognize that it is an assessment, it is not a fact. So you can use facts to do what we call grounding your assessment or to show why your assessment is trustworthy. And this is important as fundamental speech acts or elements of communication, because most of the time when I see breakdowns in organizations and breakdowns in leadership, there's somewhere in there's some element of people treating an assessment as if it is a fact. Like that's the wrong thing to do, and you're wrong for thinking that. So therefore, you are an ineffective executive director, and I'm going to talk to the rest of the board of directors to explain that accordingly. Okay? All of those are assessments that are being treated as if they're fact, and they create additional conversations that are non-productive. So when you're dealing with a situation where you feel that people are treating assessments as if they are fact, your responsibility then is to ask the questions, is to engage in the conversations around, okay, why should we trust that? What are the facts that support that assessment? For what use are we making this assessment? Understanding where you have assessments versus fact. When you leave this webinar and you go throughout the rest of your day, I want you to pay attention to a lot of those flag words. There's more of them, but again, some of those key ones. Should, must, always, never, good, bad, right, wrong. Those kind of things. Those are flag words for assessments. So throughout your day, pay attention to how often people are using those words, and recognize when you catch yourself or someone else treating an assessment as if it is a fact. Because the assessments that we create feed into the stories and the filter that we use to validate our world. And so the stories are also a form of assessment, because it is a way for us to validate what I have been through, to show that it is meaningful and that it applies to the situation. So pay attention, assessments versus fact. That's one of the first key solutions, key leadership moves that you're going to have to engage with. Now, when it comes to communication, and again, we're tying this back to challenged relationships, strained relationships with executive directors and boards. It starts with effective communication. And I mentioned a little while ago, it is not what you say that matters. It is what is heard that matters, because it's what people hear that they take into their filters, and they determine whether or not they are going to commit to take action. So it is what they hear. That's why the old adage is, why do you have two ears and one mouth? Because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. And it is about the listening. And so when you engage in communication, it is not like so many people think that it's a mechanistic, the machine-like thing where I say something and you hear the message and then you process your message and then you send it back to me and do that. That's a very mechanistic perspective. It's not happening, because we're biological people. people are biological. And so what creates reality is how I take the message and I filter it through all of my stories, my histories, my language, my body, and all of that in my emotions. Then I will base that on what I hear. Anybody who has been in any kind of a relationship, whether it be professional or personal, you know for a fact that depending on how somebody shows up, whether they're in a positive mood or a negative mood, whether they're feeling physically good or bad, whether or not I've just come from a near miss on the highway or I'm coming from vacation, all of that factors into how I hear what messages you are sending. It is a reality of dealing with humans. So recognize that and understand that. So communication is really important. One of the other areas, in addition to assessments being confused for facts, one of the other common breakdowns that I see in all kinds of organizations, but particularly in nonprofits, is that people who are in a leadership role will see something that they want to happen. They will see something that they would like another person to engage in, whether it be to go own this project, to go run this thing, to go do something, and the person will not do it, and they don't actually ask for them to do it. We call that about making effective requests and offers and promises. Okay, so when you are in a leadership position, you are in the business of making and keeping promises for your constituents or your customers. So as an executive director, you are in the business of making and keeping promises on behalf of your organization to your board members, to your customers, your client, those you serve in the community. And so because you're in the business of making promises, the only way that you can do that and keep your promises is to actually ask people in your organization to do something for you. So it is so essential for effective requests and offers to be made, for leaders to make effective requests or effective offers. So there's a couple elements around that. So let's talk about it. A request is an attempt to have people do things for you. An offer is putting yourself out there to do something for other people. This is kind of the other side of the same coin. A promise occurs at the moment that a request or an offer is made and accepted. So if you haven't asked anybody to do something you really, 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 really want them to do, guess what? You don't have a promise because you never made the request. And one of the things that I frequently hear is, well, I shouldn't have to, note the use of the flag word, I shouldn't have to tell them because they are a highly paid professional, or they should know how we do things around here. They've been doing it for this long. I shouldn't have to tell them again. That's an assessment. It's an assessment you're treating as if it is dogma, as if it is true. It is just an assessment. So effective requests and offers have these rules around them. They're spoken, never implied. You actually have to say it. If somebody's not doing something that you want them to do, guess what? The responsibility is on the leader who wants it done to make sure that they're making the request. You specify the future action. What is it that I need you to do? And it has to be specific to the listener. You clarify the reasons. I call this for the sake of what? Why is this important? And consider the emotional context. That context I was just describing about how is a person going to be hearing what I'm saying? Taking care with the words that are being used, so that they not for the taking care of it just to be nice, taking care that I make sure that people are hearing it, and I'm being very clear with what I want to happen. Conditions of satisfaction and all that. That's all essential to effective communication. So those are important, really important. So we're talking about assessments versus facts. We're talking about making clear requests and offers. Promises are made when a request or an offer is made and accepted, and I have to be really, really clear with what it is I'm asking for. Not that I'm speaking down to somebody, but I need to be clear about what it is that we're asking for. The second issue that happens is there are lines being crossed. So this is our second case study, and most of the examples had something to do with this. There's some member of the board that is overstepping their bounds. Either they're engaging directly with staff on a particular issue. There may have been staff that have reached out to the board for certain issues. Board members are interjecting themselves into some of the operations, and this becomes particularly challenging when you have that convoluted relationship, when you've got a board member who also happens to be a client or constituent of the nonprofit. I've seen some nonprofits that are comprised of people who are in the community that the nonprofit is serving. So there's a little bit of a convoluted thing. So somewhere in this second case study, there's a line that's being crossed. So how do we deal with that, and what is some of the challenges there? Okay, so the root cause that comes into this scenario comes down to, oftentimes, again, assessments being treated as if they're fact, and sometimes requests that aren't happening. So these build on each other, but also clarifying roles, what kind of commitment to our organizational structure that we've got, and understanding what constitutes a team. So let's unpack some of those a little bit. When you are in a role of leadership, you are getting things done through the actions of other people. And that's one of the things that makes any organization, particularly nonprofits, what they are. Because the promises that you're making are bigger than what one person can do by themselves. And because that's the fact, you need the help of other people to do the things to help you deliver on the promises that your organization is in existence to do. So in order to do that, you have to build teams of people to engage and deliver on those promises. So let's talk about, what is a team? We use that term a lot, and I'm probably going to be a little contrarian to what some of you may have heard already. When we talk about teams, teams are a group of people who share a promise and coordinate action to fulfill that promise to satisfy a customer. And in this case, a customer can be, internal. It could be the executive director, it could be the CFO, it could be the board of directors, it could be the actual members of the community whom the nonprofit is serving. But a team is a group of people who share a promise and coordinate action to fulfill that promise to satisfy someone. That's what makes a team. And here's the other thing that's going to be a little kicker for you. You cannot assign a team. You can't throw people in a room and say, guess what? You're a team. Go do this. That's a work group. That's not a team. A team is created because the people who comprise the team commit to be part of the team. They commit to do what it takes to deliver on that team's promise. That's essential, because if you don't have commitment, then you get, at best, compliance. So people just going through the motions. And particularly when you're dealing with the kind of issues that most nonprofits deal with, the work that you do is much too important to allow this haphazard collection of work groups, and then you sit and you wonder why things may not really be getting done. So understanding what constitutes a team, and I use that term deliberately, constitutes, what creates the team. You can't assign a team, the team is created. And so somebody has got to take the initiative to be the leader on the team, to engage in conversations, to say, are you going to be part of this team? Are you committing to this purpose? Are you committing to what we're all about? There are different types of teams in nonprofits. You've got staff and manager, probably the most common that you see. You've got managers and senior leaders. They make a team. You've got senior leaders and executive directors. They make a leadership team. And then you've got executive directors and boards. All of those, I think all those things have in common is they're all different kinds of teams, but they're teams nonetheless. So when you have lines that are being crossed between executive directors and boards, or somebody on the board is stepping over the line, the question is, have you actually had a conversation about how you are going to be a team or not? What kind of a team are you going to be? So in order to do that, We go back to some of our communication fundamentals. If I want someone to do something and to be part of the team, guess what I have to do as a leader? I have to actually have a conversation. I've got to talk to somebody and get commitments. So teams are formed by the commitments of the individuals on the teams. As I said, they're created. Some of the essential commitments, there's a number of them. Actually, there's 10 fundamental commitments that require a team, and we teach this in workshops when we're working with teams and forming teams. But some of the fundamental commitments of teams is they have to have a shared mission, shared vision, and shared values. And this is really about, what are we in existence to do? What is this team in existence to do? And how do we want to go about doing that? Simon Sinek is a leadership speaker, author, has a great book called Start With Why. And this is really at the heart of what he talks about. It's people don't care what you do until they care why you do it. And having those values and understanding it and having everybody on the team understand it is crucial. And this is more than just lip service. It's not, the phrase I hear that I say a lot is, people don't believe what they see on the walls, they believe what they see in the halls. That's about culture. That's about what people are actually really committed to doing. It's not about having a values thing that's framed on the walls. It's about, what are we living and how are we doing that? Because a lot of times what we see breakdowns is there's a disconnect between the behaviors and what is our stated values. So a team that is effective, you actually talk about, what are we here to do? Why are we here to do it? And why do I care? Then individuals who are part of the team have to own that shared purpose, that shared mission, as if it is my own. And the reason that's important is because when we go through our engagement and working, there will be things that go wrong. I promise you that. And so when things go wrong, how do we make sure that we're talking about it? So if you see, if I'm working with somebody and I have a team member and they see something that is happening that is going to keep us from delivering on the promise that we're making as a team, I really want that person to feel like they can step up and have the responsibility to step up and say what it is that they see. That's part of being a team. Where you see, indications that you have a breakdown of the team is in that same situation. If someone is not committed to owning that shared purpose as if it's their own purpose, then they're going to see people kind of going, yeah, well, I saw that 3 months ago, but I wasn't going to say anything because it's not my job. That's the CFO's job to do the budget stuff. I told you, this was happening 3 months ago. That is an indication that there's a breakdown of the team. You also have the commitment to fulfill my role in the division of labor, right? You actually have a conversation about, okay, if this is our team, who's supposed to do what? And you have a commitment to produce a mood of trust. You have to talk about how we're engaging in trustworthy conversations. And when you give me an assessment that you're going to do something, can I trust it? And if I don't trust it, I got to have a conversation about that. Like, wow, and we'll talk about trust next, but that's an important piece of it. And then shared standards for assessment. What is assessment for success? What is it that the team is going to use as the criteria by which we're determining if you are going to be successful, or if we're doing what we said we want to do? A lot of times when you have those boundary issues between board and executive directors, it's because nobody actually had a conversation around, how are we going to assess success? How are we going to assess progress? And so people, albeit maybe well-intentioned, start to take matters into their own hands and start to engage in certain things, certain behaviors. You're interpreting that as, well, you're overstepping your bounds. The other person may be interpreting that as, hey, listen, I see a problem and I'm a go-getter, so I'm just going to fix it, because you're probably busy anyway. You see where the disconnect starts to happen. So how are we having conversations and getting the commitment about what is the criteria we're going to use to assess success? Okay. And the third part of the case study, category of the case study, is around trust. And it kind of boils down to what is perceived as a lack of trust. A lot of times this shows up in nonprofits as the board expressing concern and maybe not expressing it to the executive director, but the board has a concern that there's some issue that isn't being handled properly. A lot of times this manifests itself in some personnel related issue, whether it's some managers that aren't performing, there's understaffed departments, and they think it should be moving faster than it is, something like that. So usually, some concern about the handling of some issue, or the executive director thinks the direction and course of action should be one way, the board thinks it should be another way, and the executive director kind of takes the matters into their own hands and say, you know what, yeah, I appreciate what the board's saying, but you guys are kind of figurehead. I'm really running the show today, so I'm going to do this. In either case, these are issues of trust. So these are issues that we talk about trust, and where we have assessments of trust. So let's dig into that just a little bit. So understand that trust is not absolute. Trust is not this given that is either there or it is not and will be in perpetuity. Trust is an assessment, and so we'll dig into that just a little bit. But let's define it for a second. Trust is choosing to make something that you value vulnerable to the actions of someone else. So when we say we don't trust someone, the indication for us is that, yes, and that's an issue for me because what we're talking about is something that is important to me. I care about this issue, whether it's the mission of the overall nonprofit, whether it's the delivery of a particular event, whatever it is, there's something that you care about that you value. And in order to trust someone, you have to make that thing that you value vulnerable to the actions of other people. And guess what? That's also a big part of being on a team, because a team that is really working well together recognizes that we are working in this area of trust. We are working in this area that is really important and for everyone. And we want to engage in trustworthy conversations. We want to make assessments and promises that are trustworthy. Who makes the determination that something or someone is trustworthy? Goes back to the listener. So trust is an assessment, and it changes from one situation to the next. And there's 4 elements of trust. There's sincerity, capability, capacity, and reliability. So I'll use a really simple example to kind of walk through that. And this is domain specific. It's not like this person is always and forever trustworthy or not. It is domain specific. It's in a given category. So here's the example. You may ask me, hey Dave, I want you to help me fix my car. And I'm going to look at you. I'm going to look you square in the eye and say, absolutely. I know it's cold. I know there's some issues right there. Let's go out. We're going to fix your car. I am very sincere that I really truly want to help you fix your car. Right? So you can assess that my sincerity is absolutely there. We're going to get to your car. I'm going to pop the hood and I'm going to look inside and I'm going to start to do what most guys do. And I'm going to check the oil. Maybe I'm going to check the other fluids. And that's about the extent of the ability that I will have to help you do anything with your car. So you can quickly start to question my capability in fixing your car. So should you trust me in the ability to fix your car? Absolutely not. I may be very sincere. I have no capability whatsoever. But let's assume for a second that I did have the skills to fix your car. Then we go to the next area of capacity. Do you have the capacity, including resources and time, to fix my car? You know what? I'm booked in meetings as it happens to be today. I am back-to-back meetings for pretty much the whole day. So I may be sincere. I have the skills. I do not have the time or the resources to fix your car. You can assess then that I'm not trustworthy in that particular domain, in that instance. Or I may have all of that, but every time I've told you I'm going to fix your car, I have flaked on you. I have not shown up. So I have a history or a pattern of not being able to deliver on the promise that I've made of helping you fix your car. So you see those 4 elements actually come into play. So when we're talking about I don't trust you, there's some issue of trust. Almost always it comes down to an assessment of one of these 4 areas. So ask yourself, when you are feeling like something's not trustworthy, or they're overstepping their bounds, or there's something that's not right, they shouldn't be doing that. Again, don't should on yourself, because that's one of our flag words. Look at how that area of trust is showing up for you, for someone else. So trust is not absolute, it is an assessment. Okay, so the way to deal with that is to have a conversation specifically to assess trust. So if I have somebody that I'm working with, and it has happened before, I coach a lot of people, a lot of leaders in organizations, and sometimes they, I know they're sincere, they want to do some things, they want to improve, they have the skills, we've given them the resources, and they just don't do it time and time again. Oh, I was busy, I didn't have a chance to do this. You know what? It's board meeting time, so I had to do a lot of reports, and I didn't get around to it. And so they're establishing a history. So what we do is we step back and say, let's have a conversation around trust, because this is my assessment. This is what I've seen happen. These are the facts that I've noticed. You canceled this meeting. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. I asked for this. You didn't provide it. Those are the facts that I'm using to assess. Like, okay, I don't trust when you say you're going to do it. So how are we going to fix that? That's a leadership conversation around trust. And the other area around it is making sure that you're actually building a team, having a conversation, bringing people together to say, we're going to build a team. Do you want to be part of that? Can you commit to being part of that? And then as the listener, right, because listening happens on all sides of the equation, of the exchange. You're the leader, and when someone tells you, yeah, I'm going to be part of your team, do you listen and hear commitment? There's a big difference between saying, yes, I will, and yeah, I will, sure, whatever. Essentially the same words, very, very different meaning. So how are you listening to that when you're asking for commitment to be part of the team? So trust is an assessment that happens in the listening. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause there in a second, and I'm going to ask anybody who might have had any other examples, case studies, questions come up. This would be a great opportunity to go ahead and engage in the chat function. Send them in, and if you've got any other ones, I think we've hit on some pretty good ones that seem to happen quite frequently. So if you've got something that you'd like to go ahead and additionally contribute, this would be a great time to do that. And if not, I got one other poll that I'm going to ask. And I'm curious, since we have so many executive directors and everybody actively participating, and again, I appreciate everyone showing up. I'm curious, how often and how frequently do you meet with your board members? What is the frequency with which you actually show up and talk to your board members and you guys engage in conversation? Once a quarter, once a month, more than once a month, a couple times per year, or I think I could probably point them out in a lineup if I had to. So go ahead and vote on that for me and let me know what your thoughts are. And the reason I ask that is I'm curious to see what is the basis for some of those conversations that are happening or not happening. So get a chance to vote on the poll. I'll give you another minute or so to do that. And I'm not seeing any new case studies coming in. So I'm going to just highlight then while you're finishing up the poll. I want to thank you for your time and attention. I also want to be very respectful of the time that you've got. We've got about 9 minutes left in the time we've allotted for this webinar. So this would be, again, the time to enter in any questions, any additional case studies that you've got, issues specific. to your organization. I'm going to take 30 seconds to do a shameless plug, as Roland always says. April 23rd, we're doing a one-day workshop. It's going to be in the Hartford area, and this is going to be a workshop focused on, those foundational skills with building a collaborative culture in an organization. So, what are the roadblocks? What does it take? What are the skills that I need as a leader to do that? You can get access to this on our website at customized-solutions.com. I'll put out the link there here in just a minute. But so we'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to register for that. That's something coming up in April. We did have a question come in. Question is, how do you deal with board members who come to meetings but do very little or nothing in between meetings? Great question. Great question. Again, there could be some other variables at play here, but a couple of things that stand out, in the areas that we've talked about are between meetings. Are you being very clear about the requests that you're making to do what? So when you're making a clear request, you've got to be really clear who is supposed to do what for whom. One of the essential things that you've got with any request is you've got to clarify conditions of satisfaction, is what we call it. Just what are the standards? How will I know you have done it well? And one of the other things that is so crucial in making a clear request is two very powerful words: by when. When is the request supposed to be done? So that's one of the things that stands out with that question. What if people do very little in between? Are you making really clear requests as to who is supposed to do what, by when, for whom? The other thing that could be a factor with that particular issue is, again, role clarity. There could be some assumptions about me expecting you to be able to do that. The other person may be assuming that that's not my job. That's that's Sarah's job, or I'm not supposed to do that. Or it could be an issue of clarity around roles. Like, no, I'm on the board. You don't assign me things to do. So things like that. I think it could be a good. It could be one of those variables. So I hope that answers that particular question. It comes down to, I think, role clarity. So having conversations around, what are the roles that are necessary, and also what are some of the questions around how are we making sure that you're making effective requests. We've had some other questions come in about structuring the roles of people who are more long-standing, could go back to being original founders of an organization, and the organization starts to grow, and then how do we deal with the shifting necessity of certain roles while still giving some credence and respect to kind of where people are coming from or where they started. So that's a great question. That's a really, really great question. So with one of those, I'd say that gets to be a little bit of a challenge. But again, it comes down to having conversations about what is our purpose. If we are truly in a mode of where we need to grow, and then in order to grow successfully, we have to have some conversations around what do we need to be able to do that, and to do that well. And what do we need in terms of resources and roles, and who's supposed to do what, who has the skills, who has the capacity, the capability to do those things. And then with that understanding, then who is best positioned to do that, including it may be somebody who's not even at the table. So having some of those conversations, I think, are going to be really, really essential. That, by the way, is a problem that a lot of organizations have, especially nonprofits, but also those family businesses. You see that happen a lot, where the founder, the person who started the business, gets to the point and they hand it down to one generation, I think the data says about 30% or about a third of family-owned businesses don't make it past the second generation for exactly that reason. Like, how do we deal with, the structure of a growing organization, a growing role in a growing business? So setting those standards, setting those expectations. Again, a lot of it comes down to just having some of those fundamental conversations. When you're bringing somebody on to be a board member or any role for that matter, a lot of it comes down to setting those expectations about what this role entails. I know some nonprofits, when they recruit board members, specifically, it's about, you are really, really good for us because, frankly, you've got some money and you donate. And we want people to see our board members donating. And if that's the role that you're filling, all right, okay, that's fine if you've had that conversation. But if you're giving somebody a token seat because they make a lot of donations and then they start to ask about policy decisions and then you get upset about that, usually it's because there's a breakdown in those conversations somewhere. So those are some great questions, really, really great questions. I appreciate, and they look like a couple of them still coming in. I do want to be sensitive to the time. I know we got about 3 minutes left. This is something that, as you can tell, is near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about, helping organizations and nonprofits deal with these kind of leadership issues. More than happy to continue the conversation. Here on the screen is my contact information. Again, Dave Hassenbach is the name. Customized-solutions.com is the website. The company's Customized Solutions. We do a lot of work with nonprofits. We're happy to continue engaging in the conversation. I'm going to go ahead and then hand out to you the presentation slides. So you can, right there, you should be able to just go ahead and click on the button, download the slides, and let's see. Make sure these are going, and I'm hoping I'm not having a technical issue with that. Maybe. So if you're not seeing the if you're not seeing the slides button pop up, that's fine. We'll go ahead and make sure that everything gets emailed to you. That might have been a configuration issue on my end. If you don't get this pop up, I'll make sure that we send out all of the slides to everyone who has registered anyway, and that is going to be something for you to go ahead and take and download, and everything that you just seen on the screen that will be in the presentation handout that you'll get. So again, if you've got any other questions, feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I'll be happy to engage with those with you. But otherwise, I thank you very much for your time and consideration. Best of luck with everything that you're doing, and definitely let me know if I can help in any way. Thanks again to Sarah and the folks here at Tango for giving us this opportunity to talk. I'm sure we'll get more of an opportunity in the near future. So thank you very much.